being rushed again. So postponing it 3 years is rational, reasonable, but it doesn't mean that the discussion doesn't continue in the interim. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Resuming debate, reprise de débat. The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this. Having been in this place for all the debates we've had, I've been trying to figure out the best way to explain to Canadians if there's an opposition here, if there's an argument here, why it's not between Liberals and Conservatives or between Greens and NDP and Conservatives and the Bloc. It's actually been from the very beginning a struggle for Parliament to actually deal with an issue we had been kicking down the road for too long. I mentioned earlier in debate that as the member for Saanich Gulf Islands, it happens that the quite extraordinary courage of a single woman, Sue Rodriguez, who took her irremediable medical condition of suffering all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada and was denied the opportunity for what is generally called death with dignity. The procedure she had the procedure illegally. Those who were with her at the time would have been subject to criminal penalty as well, including my friend Sven Robinson, who at the time was Member of Parliament in a different party from a different place. But it was a very fraught time, and the issue of medical assistance in dying kept coming back to me from constituents who were heartbroken that their parents or loved ones had to go through suffering, and quite often people would say to me, we wouldn't let a family pet go through this kind of suffering. Why do we allow our mums and our dads to go through this when there's no prospect that they're going to recover? This finally went back to the Supreme Court of Canada for a different decision that came out of the Carter case. The Carter case back in 2015 said, actually, refusing to allow someone the legal option to seek medical assistance from their doctor in a situation where their illness is terminal, this is really a violation of Section 7 charter rights. I only mention this because that was also with a deadline. If we have to take action on this, we can't just leave the matter. The Supreme Court of Canada has said this provision of the Criminal Code is actually a charter violation. That means you can't just let it sit there anymore. Now, it would take too much time, Madam Speaker, and my colleagues here will be relieved to know I won't go through this chapter and verse. But it's a tough, tough, tough issue for parliamentarians. And at the time, as we started debating the first iteration of allowing for death with dignity in Bill C-14, and our first Minister of Justice to deal with this was the very Honourable, I can say her name out loud because she's not here, but Jody Wilson-Raybould had to struggle with this. And our Minister of Health at the time, also very Honourable Jane Philpott, was struggling with this. And it occurred to me as the debate went on that what we had in Canada on this issue was essentially professional dispute. The lawyers in Canada wanted to make sure that the charter was respected. The doctors in Canada said, we don't want to be asked to figure out what irremediable means. We're not ready for exactly this. And that's why subsequent revisions kept happening, because after all, in our first attempt to get medical assistance in dying right, we didn't allow for advance directives. So we had subsequent court cases where people who had terminal cancer couldn't access MAiD because they decided, I better ask for it now, maybe months before death would naturally occur, months before a doctor could say, okay, you're ready now, nod. But you had to be able to physically sign, you had to, the day of, you had to confirm your procedure. Again, I better not go back through all of this, but essentially, the professional views of doctors pleading with parliamentarians outweighed the lawyers dealing with parliamentarians to say, okay, we're probably still going to have charter violations, but better that we listen to the doctors and that they're ready. Well, all of this ended up taking us back to fixing medical assistance in dying again, to try to make it more humane, to try to respond to the concerns of Canadians from coast to coast that they wanted to be able to access an advance directive in a situation that fit the MAiD template. And so that brought us to Bill C-7. Again, just to some of the comments that have been made in this place earlier today, the government and Parliament were under a deadline that was court-imposed, not politically imposed, to oblige ourselves as parliamentarians to meet what the Supreme Court of Canada said the Charter required us to do. So we had a very tight timeline, And then the Senate did something that I don't think anyone in the House expected. The Senate, with very strong opinions from the psychiatric community, again, we have a professional dispute going on here. Doctors were saying, we're not ready to extend this to people whose sole irremediable condition is mental illness. Public health professionals in addiction and mental health are saying, well, we're not ready. But with strong pressure from strong professional advice from the psychiatric community, the Senate put in that we should extend MAiD to those with an underlying condition that's only, and I don't say only as if it's a marginal or a trivial matter, is a crushingly painful and life-ending threat from mental illness. So again, we're walking this fine line. The line is even finer when you start realizing who is more likely to not be able to access mental health supports. It's the marginalized and the poor. Who's more likely to not be able to imagine continuing in life with a crushing mental illness? Again, marginalized communities. How do we protect, and again, communities, the disability community spoke with a loud voice to say, don't extend MAiD. We were worried enough it was a slippery slope when C14 first came in, and now C7. So here we are again. We have a court-imposed deadline. Let's be clear to Canadians watching today. If we don't act quickly to pass this legislation, and if the Senate doesn't act quickly to get it to royal assent, come March 17th, without, I think, anybody in this place, and certainly the provinces have spoken with one voice, many doctors and mental health professionals have spoken with one voice. If we don't act quickly, then as a matter of reality, we're up against March 17th, and medical assistance in dying becomes available to people where mental illness is the sole underlying condition. And is it irremediable? We're told by the experts no one really knows how to answer that question. Yes, some of the psychiatric community say the safeguards are there, and if 3 psychiatrists say that's it, it's irremediable, that's enough. But we're all saying, wait a minute, where are the mental health supports, particularly for the most marginalized? Where's access? And this is one that particularly perturbs me. I've had many people come to me from a community that has experience with using psilocybin, conventionally known as magic mushrooms, as a way to alleviate a mental health condition that might otherwise be irremediable, with remarkable results. Now, we know that Health Canada is currently accelerating trials on psilocybin. It strikes me as beyond a catch-22 that we would say to someone who thinks that, and their doctor thinks, that psilocybin could help them, and their alternative is that they're more likely to commit suicide, or if we don't act by March 17th, access to legal medical assistance in dying for people with an underlying condition that's a mental illness. To be told by the authorities, it would be too dangerous to let you try psilocybin, but the alternative is death. But it seems to me any medical risks to psilocybin pale in comparison to the irreversible reality of death. How can we let this happen? Well, we can't. Now, I think we need to discuss another thing in this place, and that is societal assistance in living. We know what medical assistance in dying looks like. What does societal assistance in living look like? It means ending poverty, bringing in a guaranteed livable income for all. It means access to mental health services in this country. It means a compassionate and caring approach that says to every Canadian, whether in the disability community, in Indigenous communities, youth who are struggling with addictions, to say, we hear you and we will not fail you. That means no matter how you may feel about it, colleagues, we have to pass this legislation expeditiously. Thank you.
Comments? The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today, we see that we are debating this measure at the same time as a massive scandal is unfolding. Yesterday, we learned from the Auditor General that there's evidence of corruption, waste of money, and that is why we are announcing that we want the RCMP to add to its investigation to find the truth, the possibility of criminality in the Arrive scam issue.
Asking the RCMP to expand its investigation into the Arrive scam affair, and I'm tabling this letter.
So was this a point of order, or was this a question, the honourable member? I thought the honourable member rose under a question, and his intervention doesn't relate to the question. It's a point of order. Okay.
So, Madam Speaker, the Arrive scam scandal has exploded back into public consciousness after the Auditor General revealed evidence that senior government officials got gifts like fancy whiskeys in order to give out contracts, and I'm tabling in the House of Commons. So I would like to table in the House of Commons a letter to the RCMP and Commissioner asking for the investigation to be expanded into the Arrive scam. Thank you.
Already hear no's, but I'm going to ask the question. All those opposed to the honourable leader of the official opposition moving the motion will please say nay. No. Nay. We don't have unanimous consent. Questions and comments.
The honourable member for Châteauguay-Lacolle. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise to ask a question to my honourable colleague.
Did appreciate, s'il vous plaît.
Order.
Please.
Sorry, I can't hear the honourable member what she's saying. If members want to have a conversation, please take it out into the lobby or outside of the chamber. The honourable member, l'honorable député de...
The honourable member for Châteauguay-Lacolle. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Greatly appreciated the comments, as I have all of the discussions in this debate today. And going back to 2015, I too sat on the first joint commission to study medical assistance in dying. And it was a difficult time for me as a new member, because as a practicing Catholic, it was something that really profoundly touched me. But I was able to understand through expert testimony that it's important for people to have choices. And so I'd like to hear my honourable colleague, because I know she is also a person of faith, to talk about that even though we personally may have very strong values on something, is this not something where Canadians deserve to have a choice?
For Sanish Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I must say, like you, I was very disappointed to find that the honourable leader of the official opposition was not rising to ask me a question. It would have been a first, and I was so looking forward to my response to him. But the honourable member for Châteauguay-Lacolle has asked me a very important question. I am a person of faith. I struggled with this. My constituents convinced me. I spent a lot of time talking to people in Sanish Gulf Islands who begged me to support legalizing, removing criminal sanctions for medical assistance in dying. And I'm of the view, it is very personal and a matter of conscience, I don't expect others to agree with me, who passionately and firmly believe that I believe all life is sacred, of course. I believe that taking a life is even, and your own life is also a profound matter of deep moral conflict. But I have no doubt at all that the Christian impulse to compassion is not to allow people to suffer needlessly. Medical science is now allowing us to extend our lives beyond what my grandparents and their colleagues would have, their peer group would have experienced. And as we extend our...
Sorry, I do have to allow for other questions. I'm sorry. I'm sure the honourable can continue to elaborate. L'honorable député de Montcalm.
The honourable member for Montcalm. Question, comment? Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm sure that my colleague doesn't want to use people's suffering irremediably, and whom we've never been able to help with their suffering for decades, but she's taking up an argument that we often hear in debate, which, in my opinion, is not what we should be focusing on. Accessibility to frontline care for mental health has nothing to do with the decision we will need to take about expanding medical assistance in dying or not, because the question of accessibility to care, and it's in the expert report, those people would not be eligible. So it's great to call for better care. I totally agree with that, but that is a different debate. Yet there are people who do have care and have had care for decades and who are suffering and who are being told, keep suffering for another 3 years.
The honourable member for Sandwich Gulf Islands.
Merci.
Thank you to my dear colleague. I think it's a key question, access to care. I agree that it's not acceptable to have continued suffering. I am not against access to medical assistance in dying for people who are suffering. Mental suffering is real, and we need to take action, but not immediately on March 17th.
Brief question, the honourable member for Nanaimo, Lady Smith. A very brief question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll make it brief. My question to the member is if she can share a little bit more around her decision to use time allocation, why this is important that we get this legislation put through, and the impacts on people in our communities if we do not.
A brief response, the honourable member for Sandwich Gulf Islands.
To my friend from Nanaimo, Ladysmith, it's not an easy choice because I was in this place in the Harper years where time allocation started being used on every single bill, and in those days the Liberals were against it as I was. Things change. Whoever's in power thinks that the tools that were used by the last government that they used to decry are okay if they're efficient to get things done, because might it makes right. And it's wrong. And it's always going to be wrong whether the Conservatives do it or the Liberals use it. But this time, we're up against it. We have no choice. We are responsible grown-ups. We have to get this bill through so that we don't have a default reality that I think none of us would vote for.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Battleford's Lloydminster.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The decisions that are made in this place have a direct impact on the lives